Sir, I don't want toys. I want a dad, said the little girl to the Millionaire CEO. The plaza buzzed with energy. Balloons danced in the breeze, music played from speakers, and the scent of popcorn mingled with cotton candy. Children dashed between colorful booths, trying games, winning prizes, and laughing as mascots waved from corners. It was the launch of Brain Bounce, Caleb Turner's newest educational app that promised fun and learning combined. Branded tents lined the plaza, filled with demo tablets, toys, and cheerful staff in matching shirts. An MC hyped the crowd. Welcome to the future of learning. Melissa stood at the edge, clutching the hand of her 6-year-old daughter, Mia. Her pale blue jacket looked worn, zipped high despite the warm air. Mia's dress was a little short, her sneakers well used. They had just been passing by when they saw the crowd. And a sign, free games and prizes. Can we look, Mama? Mia asked, eyes wide. Melissa hesitated. These events weren't usually meant for people like them. But she noticed volunteers handing out sandwiches and juice and nodded. Just for a bit. Inside, a staff member knelt beside Mia and smiled. Want to try a game? With her mother's quiet encouragement, Mia sat at a tablet. Her fingers flew over the screen. Puzzles, shapes, numbers. She solved them all with ease. Then the tablet lit up. Top score achieved. Cheers erupted. The MC declared, "We have a champion!" And Caleb Turner, CEO himself, stepped forward. Dressed sharply but with a friendly smile, he knelt before Mia, offering a small model toy car. "This is for you," he said warmly. "You're amazing." And then, in the hush that followed, Mia looked up and said clear and soft, "Sir, I don't want toys. I want a dad." The plaza fell silent. Caleb froze, and nothing felt like a game anymore. The noise stopped. The MC's hand fell from the mic. The crowd stilled. Caleb froze in place, his hand still holding out the toy. It was as if the sun had paused overhead. Mia's wide green eyes stayed on him, not accusing, not dramatic, just honest. Her voice was not sad, just true. Melissa gasped softly and stepped forward, her cheeks burning. "Mia," she whispered, crouching down quickly beside her. "Say thank you to the man." "But Mama," Mia said, "I already have toys. I just want someone who stays." There was nothing louder than the silence that followed. A few spectators reached into their wallets, moved by the moment. A woman nearby handed Melissa a few bills. "Here, sweetie, for your little girl." Melissa gently pushed the money back. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I don't accept money unless I've earned it. There are others who need it more." She stood up, her arm around Mia, ready to leave. Her dignity was as clear as her refusal. No shame, just pride. Caleb watched them walk away. He had built an empire on understanding people, what they needed, what they wanted, how to shape solutions. But no algorithm had prepared him for a 6-year-old who just wanted a father, or a woman who, despite having so little, walked away without asking for anything. He stood in place, the toy car growing heavier in his hand. The next morning, the world felt quieter. The frenzy of the product launch was already yesterday's news, swept away by headlines and trending hashtags. But for Caleb Turner, the voice of one little girl echoed louder than any applause. He took his coffee and walked through the park near his condo, needing air that wasn't filtered through office vents or tinted windows. The park was simple. Wooden benches, patches of clover, the occasional jogger. Just as he passed the small fountain, something familiar caught his eye. On a nearby bench, a mother and child sat, sharing a sandwich wrapped in paper. It was them, Melissa and Mia. Melissa held a water bottle between her knees, carefully tearing the sandwich in half, offering the bigger piece to her daughter. Mia accepted it with a smile, then leaned her head against her mother's arm. They laughed at something only the two of them understood. It was a small moment, but it stopped Caleb in his tracks. They looked content, not rich, not comfortable, but peaceful. He hesitated, then approached. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than usual. Melissa looked up quickly, surprised. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly in recognition. "Mr. Turner? You can call me Caleb," he said, giving a sheepish smile. "Mind if I sit?" There was a pause, then with a small gesture of her hand, she nodded to the empty space beside her. Mia looked up at him with curious eyes. "Hi," she said around a bite of sandwich. "Hi, Mia," he replied. "That was quite the thing you said yesterday." Grapple, 1.5. Melissa gave a small sigh. "I'm sorry about that. She didn't mean to cause a scene." "She didn't," Caleb said quickly. "She just told the truth." They sat in silence for a few seconds, the wind rustling the trees overhead. Caleb glanced sideways. "You live around here?" "Not far. We come here on mornings when the weather's nice. She likes to feed the ducks." Melissa spoke plainly, her posture straight, but her guard was still clearly up. "You work?" Caleb asked, careful not to sound too probing. "I do what I can," she replied. "Cleaning, sewing, helping at markets, small jobs, odd hours. Enough to keep the fridge full and her in school." He nodded. "It can't be easy." She gave a small smile. "It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be worth it." There was something about the way she said it, firm, but not defensive. She wasn't fishing for sympathy. She was simply stating her truth. He hesitated, then gently asked, "If you don't mind me asking, Mia's father?" Melissa didn't speak right away. She looked out across the park where Mia had wandered toward a patch of daisies, then softly said, "He was my first love, a boy with big dreams and an even bigger heart. We thought we could conquer the world together." She paused. "But when I told him I was pregnant, he panicked, disappeared. I haven't heard from him since." Caleb lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." Melissa shook her head. "I'm not. Not anymore, because I got her, and I'm raising her the way I wish someone had raised me, with self-respect." Her gaze turned toward him, steady. "I don't need pity, and Mia doesn't need someone who shows up because he feels guilty. She needs examples of strength, not rescue." Caleb looked at her, not as a struggling mother or a charity case, but as a woman who had chosen dignity when bitterness would have been easier. "I work with some nonprofit partners," he said gently. "They need administrative help, data entry, coordination, that kind of thing. It pays well, and I could recommend you." Melissa smiled, appreciative, but unshaken. "I'm grateful for the offer, really, but it's full-time, right?" He nodded. She looked toward Mia. "I could do it, but it would mean leaving her with someone else for most of the day. She's still little, and there are some things in childhood you only get one chance at." She met his eyes again. "There are values I want to teach her, like presence, like love not measured in hours worked or money earned." Caleb didn't argue. He simply listened. And as they sat in that quiet park, sharing a moment with no press, no staff, no cameras, something shifted inside him. For the first time in a long time, Caleb wasn't thinking about business or strategy. He was thinking about Mia and her mother, and how two people with so little could somehow radiate something he'd spent his whole life chasing. Realness. Caleb had always believed he was good at reading people. Years in business taught him to scan faces, filter motives, and make quick judgments. But Melissa Reynolds was proving to be an exception. Beautiful in a quiet way, kind without fanfare, and proud without arrogance. She lingered in his thoughts long after that morning in the park. He found himself returning to the same park more often, sometimes under the guise of a morning jog, other times just to clear his mind. And more often than not, he saw them. Melissa always arrived early, walking with Mia hand in hand, carrying a tote bag that seemed too light for its burden. She would sit on their usual bench, braid Mia's hair with gentle fingers, or share bits of breakfast, usually a boiled egg, some bread, and fruit wrapped in reused plastic. Caleb watched from a distance, never close enough to intrude, but near enough to observe. One morning, he saw Melissa help an elderly woman with a walk across the busy intersection just outside the park. No hesitation, no performative kindness. She simply stepped forward, took the woman's grocery bags, and walked beside her with the ease of someone who never waited to be asked. Another time, she stooped to pick up litter left scattered near the children's play area. Candy wrappers, water bottles, crumpled napkins. Mia joined her without being told, humming a tune as she placed trash into a nearby bin. At the food stall near the park entrance, Melissa often helped tidy up trays or restack utensils when business was slow. In return, the vendor would hand her a small bowl of rice or soup, not charity, but exchange. She always paid in some form, whether by labor or smile. Never once did Caleb see her ask for help. What struck him most was Mia. The little girl never whined, never demanded attention. She greeted the food vendor with a chirpy good morning and always thanked the birds when feeding them crumbs. One afternoon, Caleb watched as Mia offered her half-eaten cookie to another child who had dropped his snack and started to cry. She did it without looking to her mother for approval. Kindness seemed to come naturally. Caleb began to understand something he never had before. This wasn't about sympathy. Melissa and Mia didn't live with less because they had no choice. They chose dignity over convenience, grace over bitterness. And in that choice, they carried a kind of richness no wealth could buy. He had spent years surrounded by polished executives, social climbers, and people who measured worth by net gain. But these two, this woman and her daughter, showed him something different, something purer. One evening, as the sun began to dip and golden light stretched across the grass, Caleb sat at a distance on a park bench, pretending to read. He watched Melissa kneel beside Mia, who had found a caterpillar and was marveling at its fuzzy body. Melissa wasn't in a rush. She wasn't checking her phone. She crouched beside her daughter, patiently answering questions, even inventing a whimsical story about the caterpillar's journey to find its wings. Caleb smiled without realizing. He had once believed love was something loud, fireworks, declarations, diamond rings. Now he wasn't so sure. Because in that quiet moment, watching Melissa tuck a flower behind Mia's ear, Caleb felt something stir in his chest, soft, but undeniable. Admiration, respect, and yes, maybe even something deeper. He no longer saw Melissa as someone to be helped, or Mia as a girl with a heartbreaking wish. He saw them as exactly what they were, two souls quietly fighting the world with nothing but decency and love as their armor. And something inside him whispered, "This is what real strength looks like." Caleb Turner was not the kind of man who acted without strategy. Every major decision in his life had been calculated, profits forecasted, outcomes predicted. But with Melissa and Mia, there was no blueprint, no long game, only instinct. And something else he wasn't used to, feeling. He still remembered the moment Mia's high score had popped up on the screen at the event, right before her quiet plea for a father turned the crowd to stone. In order to send her the promised prize, she had typed her mother's contact number and their modest address into the registration tablet. The data had been stored, encrypted, like everything in his systems. Caleb never intended to use it, but he did, not to intrude, not to control, but to help in the one way he knew best. That week, he reached out to a nonprofit organization his company had quietly supported for years, a foundation that provided resources and flexible job opportunities for single mothers. Through the director, he requested an anonymous placement. No mention of him, no ties to his company name. He described Melissa's skill set as he imagined it: articulate, organized, intelligent, empathetic, the kind of person who would thrive in a role that allowed her to work remotely while caring for her daughter. Within days, the foundation reached out to Melissa, offering her a freelance editorial role, reviewing and curating educational content for a new children's learning platform. The hours were flexible. The pay was fair. The work could be done entirely from home. Melissa hesitated when she received the email. The job seemed too good. The tone professional, the offer respectful, but something about it made her wary. Still, it wasn't a handout. It was a job, and a meaningful one. She accepted. What Caleb hadn't expected was how diligently she threw herself into the work. Through the foundation's back-end reports, he tracked her progress anonymously. She never missed a deadline. Her feedback on the content was insightful and kind, and the revisions she suggested often made the material more engaging, more accessible. The team was impressed. They assumed she had a background in child psychology. She didn't. She just knew what children liked because she had one, and she paid attention. But that wasn't all Caleb did. Mia's eyes had lit up at the event, so curious, so bright. He had known too many children dulled by circumstance, their curiosity choked by limitations. Not Mia. He arranged, again anonymously, a scholarship through a local education initiative. It covered Mia's preschool fees for the next 2 years, along with new books, art supplies, and access to an after-school program if Melissa ever needed the time. The materials arrived in a nondescript box labeled Early Learners Fund. When Melissa opened it, she sat on the floor beside the couch, stunned. "Mom, look!" Mia squealed, pulling out a stack of picture books and a box of colored pencils. "It's like my birthday!" Melissa's hands trembled as she read the enclosed letter. It was brief and unsigned. "Some children deserve every chance to keep dreaming. We believe Mia is one of them." She looked around the apartment at the peeling paint, the flickering ceiling light, the little girl now sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through pages with wide eyes. A part of her wanted to send it all back, but she couldn't. Not when it meant giving Mia more than she ever had. She did not investigate where it came from. She didn't ask questions. She simply worked harder. Each night, after putting Mia to bed, she reviewed lessons, corrected worksheets, flagged typos, and sent warm suggestions to the editorial team. She made tea and stayed up past midnight to meet deadlines. She believed that if someone, anyone, trusted her enough to give her this chance, she had to be worthy of it. Caleb knew she would never guess it was him. But that was fine, because this wasn't about recognition. It was about making space for someone like Melissa to breathe, to grow, to prove she had never lacked talent or work ethic, only opportunity. And maybe, deep down, it was also about healing something inside himself, something that had cracked the day a little girl asked for a father instead of a toy. The first time Caleb saw her again after the scholarship arrived was purely intentional, though he made it look like chance. It was late afternoon. The sky was brushed with soft streaks of orange and gold, and the park near his building was alive with the laughter of children, the creak of swings, the gentle hum of summer settling in. Melissa and Mia were sitting under the same old oak tree they always seemed to favor. Melissa had her back to the tree, eyes on a worn paperback in her lap. Mia was beside her, coloring in a small sketchbook with the same pencils from the anonymous package. Caleb walked past, pretended to notice them with surprise, then offered a warm hello. From that moment on, the encounters became more frequent, yet always carefully timed. A stroll through the park when he knew they'd be there. A visit to the local library where he'd accidentally end up in the children's reading room when Melissa arrived for story hour. A walk near the corner bakery she liked, right around lunchtime. Each time, Melissa greeted him politely, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with weary eyes, but always with grace. Then one evening, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. Caleb had stopped at a food stall near the edge of the park, a small no-name place with sizzling pans and plastic chairs. He ordered a simple noodle bowl, his thoughts distracted, when he reached into his coat pocket and realized with a jolt that his wallet was missing. The vendor frowned. "Sir, no tab here. I understand, Caleb hesitated, reaching instinctively for his phone, realizing even that was in his office bag. Voices nearby started to murmur. A few people glanced at him, then at the vendor. There was tension in the air, awkward, almost humiliating. Then came a quiet voice behind him. "I've got it." Melissa stepped forward, handed a few bills to the vendor without waiting for change, then turned to Caleb and whispered, "Come on." She walked him away before he could protest. "Melissa, wait," he started, but she cut him off gently. "I didn't do that because you're the CEO," she said, her tone even. "I did it because I hate seeing anyone embarrassed in public. That's all." He paused, stunned. It was such a small act, barely a $10 meal, but the way she'd done it, without show, without judgment, with quiet resolve, hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. When he got home that night, Caleb stood in his spotless apartment, and stared at his reflection in the window. He wasn't used to people helping him. Not like that. Not without an agenda. He wasn't used to being seen as anything other than powerful, wealthy, capable. But Melissa had seen something else. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, he wanted someone to see past the surface. From that night on, Caleb began inviting them carefully, casually, for dinner. A walk first, then a suggestion. "There's a place around the corner." But Melissa always gently steered them away from anything too fancy. "No white tablecloths," she'd say with a smile. "Mia's not used to cloth napkins and crystal water glasses." So they ate street food, sandwiches on park benches, rice bowls on folding chairs, once even corn dogs from a festival vendor while watching fireflies. And they talked about Mia's fascination with stars, about Melissa's dreams of maybe writing children's books someday, about Caleb's childhood dog, Max, who once chewed through an entire sofa leg. Mia began calling him Uncle Caleb. The first time she did, Melissa froze. Caleb only smiled. He never corrected her. Something in him shifted during those evenings, not all at once, but steadily. Melissa wasn't a woman to pity. She was a woman who had fought for her dignity, who gave her daughter laughter on a tight budget, who taught empathy not by preaching, but by doing. She was the reason he looked forward to every coincidental meeting. Not because she needed him, but because she made him feel human again. And slowly, surely, Caleb stopped seeing her as someone he wanted to help and began seeing her as someone he could not stop thinking about. It was a warm Saturday morning, the kind when the streets of the old neighborhood came alive with sidewalk vendors and children's laughter. Melissa and Mia were sitting on their usual bench near the bakery, sharing a small cup of fruit salad and watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. That was when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a woman dressed in cream cashmere and pearls, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Her hair was perfectly styled, her face taut with disdain. Melissa looked up, confused, until the woman stopped directly in front of her and spoke. "You're Melissa, aren't you?" she asked coldly. Melissa stood, her body tensing. "Yes, can I help you? I'm Caleb's mother." The name hit like a stone, but Melissa said nothing. She only placed a gentle hand on Mia's shoulder. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," the woman continued, her voice low but cutting. "But I see right through you. A struggling single mother latching on to a wealthy man. Classic." People nearby began to turn their heads. Melissa's lips parted slightly, stunned. "Excuse me? You heard me. This little act of yours, taking charity, letting him buy your daughter things, showing up at just the right places, it's all very convenient." Mia looked up, eyes wide, confused. Melissa instinctively knelt beside her, pulling her close, shielding her from the sharpness of the woman's words. "You think you're going to climb into our family with sad eyes and street food?" the woman sneered. "Find another ladder to climb." Melissa rose slowly, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't know what you think you know about me," she said, "but I've never taken a cent from your son out of pity. And I never asked him for anything." "Oh, please," the woman scoffed. "You didn't have to." Melissa took Mia's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving." They turned to walk away, but after a few steps, Melissa stopped. She turned back around, looked the woman in the eye, and said, her voice clear and unwavering, "I may be poor, but my daughter will not grow up believing she's less than anyone. She will not grow up thinking her mother traded her dignity for comfort. We don't need anyone's charity, and we certainly don't need your approval." Then she walked away, shoulders straight, head high. She didn't cry until they were home, behind a locked door, with Mia napping in the next room. And she didn't return Caleb's calls. Not that day, not the next. Caleb, when he heard what had happened, was stunned. He hadn't known his mother had found Melissa. Hadn't thought she'd go that far, but he should have. He paced his apartment in silence, phone in hand, replaying every word his mother had likely said, imagining Melissa's face, her pain, her anger, her dignity in the face of humiliation. He tried calling again. No answer. He sent a message. Please let me explain. No reply. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt helpless, not because he had no power, but because all the power in the world could not fix what had been broken in that moment. He sat alone on his balcony that night, staring at the stars, wondering if he had just lost the only people who had ever made him feel like more than his bank account. He hadn't cried since his father died. But that night, the tears came, quiet, unstoppable, because for the first time in a long time, he had found something real, and it had slipped through his fingers. The sun was beginning to dip below the city skyline, casting a soft, golden hue over the empty park. The usual noise of children playing and street vendors calling out had faded with the end of the day. The swings hung still, the benches half-shadowed in twilight. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Caleb stood near the edge of the path, scanning the park like he had for the last 2 evenings. His heart thudded against his ribs as he spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on a worn wooden bench. Melissa. She was hunched slightly, arms wrapped around herself as if the summer breeze carried more than just chill. Her blonde hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Mia was not with her. He approached slowly, cautiously, not wanting to startle her, but she heard his footsteps anyway and looked up. Their eyes met. Neither of them said a word for several seconds. Then Caleb spoke, his voice low but certain. "I'm sorry." Melissa looked away. "You don't have to apologize for your mother." "I'm not," he said, stepping closer. "I'm apologizing because I didn't protect you from her, and because I should have told her, told everyone, how much you matter to me." Melissa's eyes welled up, but she didn't speak. Caleb took a breath and sat down beside her. Not too close, just enough that she could feel his presence. "I know you've been through too much to trust easily," he continued. "I know dignity isn't just a word for you. It's the way you live your life. And I admire that more than I can say." Still, Melissa said nothing. He turned to her, his voice tightening with emotion. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who said yes to everything I wanted. And yet I've never felt more alive than I do when I'm with you and Mia, because you don't want anything from me except the truth." Melissa finally looked at him again. Her lips parted as if to respond, but the words got caught somewhere between her heart and her throat. Caleb leaned in slightly, his voice soft. "Love doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask for approval. It just is. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to impress anyone. You already are enough." A tear slipped down Melissa's cheek, and Caleb instinctively reached out, gently taking her hand. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. She stared at their joined hands, the contrast between his strong fingers and her slender, worn ones. Then, slowly, very slowly, her fingers curled around his. She didn't say a word, but she didn't let go. And in that silence, something powerful passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of one. They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, the last rays of sunlight casting golden edges around them. The pain of the last few days still lingered. The bruises from harsh words and broken trust had not vanished. But in that quiet corner of the world, something began to heal, not with grand speeches or sweeping gestures, but with presence, with truth, with one man choosing to stay and one woman daring to let him. As the sky deepened into a wash of violet and silver, Caleb whispered, "Thank you for not walking away." Melissa's voice finally came, quiet, cracked, but steady. "I almost did. But you didn't," he said, his grip tightening just a little. She nodded, and that was enough for now. The doorbell rang just as Melissa finished setting the table. She wasn't expecting anyone. Caleb had texted earlier to say he might be late, and Mia was still humming in the bathroom, washing her hands before dinner. Melissa opened the door cautiously, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Standing there was a woman in a light beige coat, her graying hair pulled into a neat bun. In her arms she carried a small wrapped box with colorful paper and, in the other, a covered casserole dish. Melissa froze. It took her a second to recognize the woman, Caleb's mother. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without saying a word, the older woman extended both hands, offering the box and the food. Her face was not warm, but it was no longer cold. Her eyes held no apology, but they also held no disdain, just something quiet, measured. Acceptance. Melissa hesitated before reaching out, her fingers brushing the woman's as she took the items. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb's mother gave a single nod, then looked past her toward the sounds of laughter from inside. "You can come in," Melissa said, surprising herself. They sat down to dinner at Melissa's modest table, mismatched chairs and all. Mia was delighted with the toy. The box revealed a simple doll with golden hair and a red dress. "She looks like Mommy," Mia giggled. Melissa served the food. Caleb arrived moments later, stunned to find his mother already seated, chatting softly with Mia about school. The dinner was not smooth. There were silences, pauses, careful glances, but there was no tension either, just the tentative peace of people trying. Caleb reached under the table and gave Melissa's hand a squeeze. She returned it. No words needed. After the meal, Melissa insisted on washing the dishes. Caleb joined her in the small kitchen, drying plates while Mia stayed behind, entertaining their unexpected guests with her favorite riddles. The clanking of dishes was rhythmic, almost soothing. "Do you think she'll come again?" Caleb asked. Melissa shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. But she came today. That's enough." He nodded, setting a plate in the rack. Just as they were finishing, Mia tiptoed in, tugging Caleb by the hand. "Can I ask something?" she whispered. "Of course, Munchkin," Caleb said, bending down to her level. Mia leaned close, cupped her hand around his ear as if guarding a sacred secret. "Now, can you be my dad?" Caleb's heart stopped. He looked up at Melissa, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She gave the faintest nod. He turned back to Mia and kissed her forehead gently. "Daddy's always here, Princess." Mia beamed, wrapping her little arms around his neck. Later that evening, the three of them took a slow walk through the park nearby. The sky was streaked with orange and gold, the trees casting long shadows across the path. Melissa held Mia's left hand, Caleb her right. They didn't talk much. They just walked. The world around them quiet and soft. No photographers, no headlines. Just a man, a woman, and a child. Finally, a family. They paused near the playground, where Mia ran off to chase butterflies and sunlight. Caleb turned to Melissa. "Are you happy?" She smiled, watching their daughter. "I'm peaceful. That's more than I've had in a long time." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, and together they stood there in the golden hour of something new, not flashy or grand, but real. If this story touched your heart, just like little Mia's words once stopped a crowd in its tracks, imagine how many lives can change when we choose kindness, empathy, and quiet strength. Caleb didn't set out to find a family that day, but love has a way of finding us when we least expect it. If you believe in the power of everyday moments, in the beauty of second chances, and in stories that warm your soul, make sure to subscribe to DJ Stories. We bring you true-to-life tales of hope, healing, and humanity that remind us all what really matters. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and we'll see you in the next story.